now watching Way Back Wednesday, sponsored by Davenport Auto Park, the ride of your life. And also sponsored by Flores Glass, serving the area since 1977 with residential and commercial work.
But anytime I can go to the beach and spend a little time in the salt air and the sea breeze, it's always a good time for me. So it was good to get away. It was good to get back. We are live tonight. It's Wednesday, October the 19th. If you're watching this show on any other time, you're watching a replay. But if you're watching tonight, Wednesday, October 19th, we are live. A couple of weeks ago, if you remember, we talked about the big mystery about the dinosaur skeleton that was supposed to be erected down at Sunset Park. I noticed, I think it was yesterday or the day one, Gene Herring has picked up this mystery too and put a little blip there on his Facebook page. And like myself, he's very interested in trying to find out what happened to the dinosaur skeleton. Was it ever erected? No one seems to ever recall it being erected out there in front of the old Children's Museum where it was supposed to be erected. And so I did a little digging tonight, trying to get a little more information on that. Found out a little bit more. We'll share that with you in a little bit. But while I was digging around, as is often the case, I stumbled across these pictures and these articles and these things that sometimes aren't at all related to the subject matter that I'm looking for, but they perked my interest. And so I've got a handful, 3 or 4 pictures tonight I wanted to share with you that aren't really related to anything in particular. I just thought they were neat pictures. And some I don't think we've seen any of these, in fact. So without any further ado, Lee, if we're ready, back in the control room, we put up item number 1 tonight. I found this article in a 1949, this picture in a 1949 issue of the Rocky Mountain Telegram. And we've talked in the past about these landscape little features. Various local photographers put these pictures in a little caption beneath them. And some of you already recognize this, and for those that cannot recognize it, this is the Atlantic Coastline Emerson Shops, of course, down Church Street, South Rocky Mount. And the caption, I'll read this to you because it's probably hard to read on your screen there, but it says the Atlantic Coastline Emerson Shops in South Rocky Mount employ 2,500 men, a good proportion of all those working in the city. This aerial view shows where they work. In the center is administration building, right background the roundhouse, and in the left background the locomotive shops. Bisecting the picture is a huge traveling overhead crane capable of picking up many tons at once. I've seen several pictures of the Emerson shops, even a few aerial shots, but in 1949, aerial shots of Rocky Mount were somewhat rare. Charlie Killebrew's got a few shots, and I think he probably took this one that are from the late 40s. But this is to be a newspaper printed photograph. It's got some pretty good clarity to it. It may not come across as good on your screen as it does when you actually print the page off, the picture I should say. But I just thought it was a neat picture from January of 1949 showing the Emerson shops and particularly the roundhouse. We've talked about that roundhouse a couple of times in previous shows, but it's hard to get a good picture of it from any time frame because it's of course long gone now. As most of the Emerson shops are now torn down, and what bit of it is left is being torn down fairly steadily, so it won't be long it'll all be gone. But I just thought it was a neat picture of a bygone era of the Emerson shops in South Rocky Mount. Okay, this next picture doesn't have anything to do with Rocky Mount at all. I know you say that up front, and it may be a bit confusing to some of you, but there's a bit of a story here that I just found to be somewhat fascinating, frankly, something I had never heard before. So Lee, if you would, put up item number 2. We'll show the picture first. Okay, what you're seeing here, the headline says, Hiroshima Girls Arrive, in reference to Hiroshima or Hiroshima for those that prefer the older pronunciation. But this picture appeared in the Rocky Mount Telegram in 1955. Now, these girls weren't arriving here in Rocky Mount. First of all, I need to clarify that. They were actually arriving at Travis Air Force Base in California. And I want to read the caption to you because this is, keep in mind, May of 1955 now. We're 10 years after World War II was over with. And so you would think by then there's not much going about to remind us of World War II, and particularly the horrors of the war. But this caption reads, "Girl victims of the Hiroshima A-bomb are shown arriving at Travis Air Force Base in California en route to the Mount Sinai Hospital in New York, where they will receive plastic and cosmetic reconstructive surgery. Photo shows first of 25 Japanese girls leaving Air Force plane for a brief rest before continuing to New York." So these were 25 Japanese girls who were likely badly, what's the word I'm looking for, disfigured from being exposed to the nuclear blast that hit their city or the radiation poisoning thereafter. And so as a mission of mercy, if you will, I'm not sure how many Japanese girls ended up coming to the United States, but certainly there were a few plane loads at least. They came here, they were taken to the Mount Sinai Medical Center in New York, where they received some cosmetic surgery to try to repair the scars and the damage of the horrible war that they had lived through and obviously been exposed to. So just a neat little side story there, but something I'd never heard before. I never knew that the United States had anything to do with, trying to provide cosmetic surgery and reparative surgeries to some of these victims of the war in Japan. Interestingly enough, I had an uncle, Floyd Adcox, who was in the Army, and he actually got drafted toward the tail end of World War II, and he went with a group of troops known as the Occupation Forces. After the war, went into Japan. We were, of course, the occupying force then. And so, sadly, I never got a chance to talk to him about his time in Japan or what exactly he was tasked with doing while there. But I suspect it was, at least in some ways, assisting with the rebuilding and getting things back to some degree of normalcy in Japan after the bombs that were dropped on Nagasaki and Hiroshima. So anyway, again, just a little neat tidbit of history there. Lee, item number 3, and this is an old photograph that appeared in May of 1953. And you see the headline here, it says Planters Cottonseed Company Factory. I'm going to read this caption to you. It says, Planters Cottonseed Oil Company was, in 1910, as essentially a Rocky Mount home industry as any concern in the city. All the stockholders were citizens of this community, the most progressive of the farmers and businessmen. The plant was organized in 1904 and was located on the Edgecombe County side of Rocky Mount. Using cottonseed, it manufactured oil, a high-grade meal for stock feeding purposes, and fertilizer peculiarly adapted to the needs of local farmlands. The president and general manager was E.L. Daltrich, who represented Edgecombe County in the legislature 2 terms. I'm not absolutely certain, but I do believe this Mr. E.L. Daltrich is the great-grandfather of Rocky Mount City Council member Lige Daltrich. Lige, I know, is either a 3rd or a 4th. His father is also E.L. Daltrich, and so I think this was Lige's great-grandfather that started this company. But 1904, some Planters Cottonseed Oil Mill got started here in Rocky Mount, and I do believe this is the same location where, golly, around 1983, I think it was, I had a big fire over there that all burned down to the ground. But anyway, I had not seen this picture. It's a little grainy, a little dark, hard to see, but a little bit of history there about the mill and when it got started. And I thought it was particularly interesting that Mr. E.L. Daltrich was the one who, the president and general manager, and like I said, that is, I'm fairly certain, a relative of our local city council member, Lige Daltrich, and I think it's his great-grandfather. So anyway, okay. Moving on, Lee, item number 4, if you would. I just thought this was neat. I stumbled across this looking for some other things, and I know it's hard to see on your screen, so what this is a graded school report, Rocky Mount, North Carolina. It's dated July the 1st, 1916, and it says, to the mayor and board of aldermen. And keep in mind, in the early days of Rocky Mount city government, we didn't have any city councilmen, we had aldermen. And I believe at one time there were, 7 or 8 aldermen. Eventually became, of course, replaced by city council members. But in 1916, this report was prepared and sent to the mayor of Rocky Mount and the board of aldermen And it says, we submit the following as our annual report of receipts and disbursements for the year ending July 1st, 1916. And I'm just going to read through a few of these. Balance on hand, $28.24. Special city tax, $25,160. Tuition, $2,629. Edgecombe Old and New. I'm not sure what the difference there is between Edgecombe Old and Edgecombe New, but there's two amounts, one of $3,800 and one of $4,700. And it goes on to talk about disbursements have been, and this is for the previous year, I'm guessing, but it says disbursements have been salary of superintendent, $1,800, salaries of white teachers, $19,163, and I had to do this, read this one twice. Salaries of colored teachers, $3,304. Now you talk about an income disparity there, and keep in mind, 1916 was a different time, and it wasn't fair, obviously, but it was as it was. They were paying white teachers $19,000 and colored teachers $3,300. Building and repairs on white schools totaled $2,921. Building and repairs on colored schools totaled $596. And again, 1916 is a different time frame, different mindset. That, in all fairness, there probably was not as many colored students, to use the term they're using here. So there certainly wasn't as many schools that were dedicated to colored students in 1916. So it would stand to reason that a bigger budget allocation would go to the larger number of students. In this case, that would have been the white students. But still, there's a disparity there, and it's pretty shocking when you look at it in comparison. And it goes on to talk about $85 in the libraries, $125 for a secretary, $204 for a stenographer. And so, again, this was a report that was generated for the graded school in Rocky Mount, dated 1916, and it's respectfully submitted by Thomas H. Battle, who was a chairman. So, I'm not sure what to make of all this, other than there was obviously some effort put into providing some pretty precise information about how money was being spent, and specifically how it was spent on education locally. And they did a fairly detailed breakdown of all the expenditures and all the receipts that came into the system. I did mention earlier they had $40,465 total receipts, and total disbursements came out to be $42,926. So obviously they had a deficit of some, $3,000 or $4,000 that they probably had to make up in some other way. But I just thought it was an interesting piece of history there, dating back to 1916 and how money was spent on education here locally. Okay, the graded school that this is referring to, at least the white graded school, was in the location, and we've talked about this before. There was the East School, there was the West School, but the graded school, best I can tell from research I was doing, was at the same location where present day James Craig Brazel School was located. And Lee, if you would put up item number 5, and this is just to give you a reference. This is, of course, the JC, or James Craig Brazel School, over on Pearl Street. And I saw another reference to this graded school in 1916 was listed as being over on Pearl Street. In fact, I even saw a reference to a house or room that was for rent in a house that was directly across the street from the graded school on Pearl Street. So obviously now there's no houses across from J.C. Brazel Elementary School there, but at one time there were, and there were some rooms to rent over there. So again, just kind of a look back at Rocky Mount's had over the years many different schools, and some have been built on top of the same location where others were built. I seem to recall there being some discussion about the original school there on this property being burned down sometime in the 1920s, I think it was, and then this school was built. So anyway, Eric Dawson stopped by to see me this week and made last week actually, and made a reference to a gentleman who was from Rocky Mount that I'd never heard of. And so I did a little bit of research. I didn't have time to do a whole lot because I had kind of already gone in another direction. But I wanted just to kind of spend a few minutes tonight talking about a man that some of you may be familiar with. I certainly was not. But his name was Bill Murray, William Murray, or William David Murray, I think was his full name. But he was from Rocky Mount originally. I think he was born sometime in the early 1900s. And he had a fairly illustrious career in the sporting world and was actually the head coach at Duke for a while. And Lee, if you would, put up item number 6. This is from 1961, and it's kind of a small picture, not the best quality picture. But if I'm not mistaken, I believe the gentleman there to the left of the trophy, I think, I've got another picture of a later date. He began to lose his hair in later years, so the later pictures I've got, he doesn't have as much hair. Actually, I think that might be him on the far left. I think I misspoke. I think that's him on the far left. But anyway, this picture was taken sometime around 1961, and it appeared in the Duke, I guess it was called the Flicker. I'm not familiar with that, some kind of local school publication there on campus, I guess. But anyway, Mr. Murray had a fairly successful coaching career. He coached for 2 different schools, I said Duke, and not William and Mary, there's another school he taught at also, or coached, I should say, coached that. But in any case, I don't think he ever came back to Rocky Mount. I'm not sure where he's buried. He passed away some years back. But Lee, let's go to the next picture, item number 7. There you go. That's a bust of him that is on display now at the William David Murray building there on campus at Duke. And you see he was a coach there at Duke from 1951 to 1965. I think he won ACC champions, or his team, I should say, was ACC champions for 2 or 3 years running. I think they made the national polls a time or two, too. But in any case, he had a very successful career as a football coach. And I'm drawing a blank now as to the other team he coached for, but he did coach for another team in addition to coaching over at Duke. And lastly, Lee, item number 7, I'm sorry, that was 7. Item number 8 is the most recent picture I could find of him, and this was from 1965. I'm not sure exactly. I did not find an obituary for him, so I think it's sometime shortly after here. Oh, we got a call. Maybe someone knows more about him. Let's see. Hello, caller. You on the air?
All right, the Murray fellow, after he got out of college at Duke, he wound up going to Delaware and had a tenure of time up there coaching up there at, I think, the University of Delaware.
Okay.
Came back to Durham in 1951 and became the head football coach at Duke University.
Do you know, Eric, if he was buried around here, or you remember hearing anybody say?
I don't know.
I looked briefly for an obituary and did not find one. I'll do a little more digging, see if I can find one, but I'm just not sure. It seemed like to me I did see a reference to him being buried in somewhere around Durham, though. But I may be mistaken. I'll do some digging, see if I can find out.
Goodbye.
Okay, buddy. Thank you. Okay. Yeah, you know, Rocky Mount, we've talked in the past about some of the more notable sports figures who came out of Rocky Mount. Certainly Jim Clack played pro football here, and then Danny Talbert played for the Redskins, had a great career at Carolina. We talked about Sugar Ray Robinson, who was born here and later moved away from Rocky Mount. There were a number of really successful athletes. We don't hear too much about the coaches, so it was nice to hear about Mr. Murray here, good homeboy who's obviously did very well in the coaching circles and from Rocky Mount again. So, okay. You know, we're going to go to a break here in just a minute. Before we do, I mentioned at the top of the show that there was quite a bit of interest generated about a story a couple of weeks ago about the dinosaur skeleton, and the one that was supposed to be erected out in front of the Children's Museum at Sunset Park. And as I said earlier, I noticed that Gene Herring had, I don't know if he caught the show or not, or someone had put a bug in his ear about it, but he had also gone to the newspapers.com website, and he had found some of the same pictures I had found and shared with you a couple of weeks ago. And so he had put out that there was still a mystery as to what happened to those bones, and were they ever assembled anywhere? Were they sent away? Were they put in storage? And if so, are they still in storage? I saw a couple references to them at one time being stored, believe it or not, at the old Avalon Airport out there on 97 Highway. So I went to digging for information about bones on the Avalon Airport, or anything to do with the skeleton of a dinosaur at Avalon Airport. And as I said earlier, that kind of got me off on a tangent. And I thought, well, maybe I'd do some more research on Maywood's Bell. I could find out more. So I started looking for information on Maywood's Bell. And that got off into another tangent all into itself. So I was like an octopus with 8 arms trying to do 8 different kinds of research at one time. And so when I come out from the break, we'll get more into this. But in the meantime, if you got to get a little bathroom break or a little snacky poo break, go ahead and take care of a little business now. And we'll be right back in a few minutes with more Way Back Wednesday. Take it away, Lee.
I'm Daniel Moss, owner of Cornerstone Funeral Home, and I'd like to invite you and your family to give our family an opportunity to serve you in your time of need. And we offer a full line of funeral services, everything from visitations to graveside services to cremations on site with a live crematory, as well as a banquet hall to meet the catering needs of our families that we serve. We offer catering service, we offer refreshments prior to visitations and services of our family, and we want to invite you to come and experience the difference here at Cornerstone Funeral Home.
When faced with special care needs for elderly or disabled loved ones, families want compassionate, comforting care. That's Tender Touch Home Care Services' goal, providing the level of care we would expect for our own. With over 10 years of home care excellence, Tender Touch provides an array of services that keeps your loved one at home. From personal care, light housekeeping, errands, and meal preparation, to our private duty care program, which combines all of our home care offerings in one package.
Tender Touch Home Care Services, where your needs are our concern.
I mentioned about dinosaur bones, and I saw a couple references to the possibility they were stored out at the airport, and so the old Avalon Airport. So I got looking in that regard to see what I could find out about dinosaur bones stored at Avalon Airport, and I thought, well, maybe it's assembled somewhere and stuck in a corner somewhere we don't know about. So I got to doing some digging, and I found, some of you may remember, I certainly do, for many years there was a little column in the Rocky Mountain Telegram called Open Line. And you call in, the phone number was listed there, and I believe it's the same phone number they got today, 446-5161 or 5162. But you could call in and ask a question, and someone there at the Telegram would try to find an answer to your question. So in March of 1968, now this is a good 5 or 6 years after the last report of any dinosaur bone activity going on with the Children's Museum dinosaur. March of 1968, someone called in to the open line request line for the Rocky Mountain Telegram. And Lee, if you would put up item number 9. And this is a neat little category. And like I said, I remember this. I remember that people would call in and ask a question and get an answer in the Telegram. And it says the open line supplies answers to your questions. Telephone 446-5162, only between 2 and 4 p.m., Mondays through Friday, or you can write the open line to Sunday Telegram, Rocky Mount 27801. So the question this week was, what happened to the giant concrete dinosaur project at Sunset Park? And the person didn't leave their full name, they just left their initials, EEA. Any idea who EEA is? I don't, but anyway, and here's the answer that came back from the Telegram. There is no positive answer concerning the future of this project. The project was originally announced in 1959 when Harold Menzies, then director of the Children's Museum, took it as a personal project. He got the many molds necessary to construct the bone structure of the dinosaur from Utah, where a copy of the dinosaur had been built. The molds were trucked to Rocky Mount, where they were stored. They are still on loan. Menzies said the project was delayed for several years for one reason or another. The molds are now stored in the old Avalon Airport building on North Carolina 97 East. We expect to resume work on the project in the spring. So keep in mind, this is March of 1968, and at that time, it looks like the molds were used to create the I guess, the concrete bones, and the molds were on loan. So my guess is the molds have since been sent back to wherever they came from, Utah, I guess it was. Excuse me. And so the question now is, were they ever able to create enough bones from the molds that they had on loan to assemble the dinosaur? And we're still, at this point, unsure of the answer to that question. I've been out there to the airport, not recently. Years ago, I was out there. I actually knew someone who had an old car stored out there. It was an old Jaguar, as I recall. And I was told about the car, and I was given permission to go out there and look at the car. And I went, and unfortunately, it had been stored in a hangar that the roof had totally rotted out. This was before they finally demolished everything to do with the old airport out there. And so, of course, the car was trashed. It was too far gone to even be salvaged or an attempt made to repair it. And at that time, I don't recall seeing anything other than this partially collapsed terminal with an old Jaguar in it. I didn't look for anything else, granted, but I didn't see anything else either. So my guess at this point is that the molds were probably sent back, because they were on loan. They were loaned to the city of Rocky Mountain, and specifically to the Children's Museum, for the sole purpose of, using concrete to create the bones to eventually recreate this dinosaur skeleton. And so at some point, I would imagine the folks in Utah says, hey, if you guys aren't going to build the dinosaurs, send our molds back over here. And so I'm guessing that's what happened. I'm guessing the molds got sent back. Now, the big question then is, did they have enough time before they sent the molds back to actually make the bones out of concrete? And if they did, where are the bones now? If they never got a chance to complete making the bones or the concrete reproductions of the bones, and of course there was no way to reconstruct the dinosaur skeleton. And if they did finish getting the concrete bones, if you will, created from molds, if it was never assembled, the likelihood is those concrete bones probably eventually ended up in some kind of crushing apparatus and got turned back into crush and run or gravel to fit in somebody's driveway. That's just a guess. But anyway, that was in March of 1968. So, as I said, I was looking in earnest with information about the Avalon Airport, trying to find something about the dinosaur bones in addition to this little article right here in this open line. I never did find anything else. But I did find some neat things that I thought would be interesting to take a look at regarding the Avalon Airport itself. I've never, at least I don't recall, ever seeing a picture of it. And for those that may not be familiar with the Avalon Airport, if you go out old Highway 97 out there past what used to be Holloman Store, I think it's now called Bridge Grocery Store, but it's right there where 97 crosses over, what is that, Cool Spring Road out there. Anyway, on the left-hand side, before you get to the Barn Hill sand pits and all that place, it's where the old Avalon Airport used to be. And up until, 7 or 8 years ago, you could actually still see the outline of the runway. In fact, the last time I was out there looking at the old car, and that's been several years ago now, probably 10 or 12 years at least, if not further back than that, you could still see the outline of the airport. Now, of course, there are pine trees growing in what was the airport, what was the runway, and the casual observer who rode by there would never know there was an airport there at all. It just doesn't, there's no clue left now to tell you that used to be an airport out there. But it was in operation for a couple of decades, I guess, from the 1940s up till the time the new Rocky Mountain Airport over on Church Street got operational. And so I went in looking in earnest for not only information, but hopefully some pictures. And I didn't find any pictures, but I did find a little bit I wanted to share with you. So Lee, if you would, put up item number 10. Okay, and this is an article that appeared in March of 1946. And you see the headline, Open Sunday, Attention, Attention, Citizens of Rocky Mountain and Eastern North Carolina. Avalon Air Service will be open for business Sunday, March the, I guess it's kind of blurred out, I'm guessing 14th. But anyway, and every day thereafter, we are located at Avalon Airport on Leggett Highway, route number 95. And of course, that's not Interstate 95. That's what 97 used to be referred to before it changed to 97. 1.5 miles from Highway 301 and only 2.5 miles from the city. R.E. Lee and Ralph L. Sturdivant Sr., operators and old-timers in aviation, cordially invite your patronage. We offer complete flying service, sightseeing flights over Rocky Mount, $150 per person. That's $1.50, by the way. $1.50 per person. Flight instruction is $10 per hour in the new Aeronica Champion or Piper Cruiser. Plane rentals, $7 an hour. Charter service anywhere, anytime, rates quoted on request. Flight instruction will be given by Mr. R.E. Lee or Ralph I. Sturdivant Sr. Both are government licensed instructors with many hours experience training pilots for the Army Air Forces, Avalon Air Service, aircraft sales and service. So as you can see, there was big plans for the Avalon Airport and the air service out there when it got started. And I'm not sure how much of these plans came to fruition. I suspect there were probably a few pilots trained out there, got their private pilot's license, but I don't recall hearing any dates about how long an operation as far as the pilot flying service to learn how to become a pilot, I should say. So this was in March of 1946. All right, item number 11, Lee. In May of 1946, this ad appeared in the Rocky Mount Telegram, and it says, "Learn to fly and enjoy yourself. Avalon Air Service can teach you." Harvey L. Whitley of 520 Cokie Road made his first solo flight at Avalon Airport on Sunday, May 19th. Be modern, start flying today, located on Leggett Highway, route number 95. So certainly they started out teaching people how to fly. And ironic, the first ad appeared in March of 46, and in March, April, May, 3 months later, this Mr. Whitley was already flying solo. In 3 months' time, he had got his required time in to fly solo and made his first solo flight. I had a conversation with Bob Lee earlier in the week. When I was in the military, I was stationed for a while in Memphis, Tennessee, and the local airport there had a program, or offering, if you will, for enlisted people that wanted to learn how to fly. For $800, you could get your pilot's license. I mean, that was rental on the airplane, pilot instruction, everything. And I think it was, a 3 or 4 month long course. And you started out flying a little Piper Cub type aircraft, but $800. And so, of course, back then it might as well have been $8,000. I didn't have the money to take the lessons, and so I didn't. But many years later, when I got out of the Navy, I went to work here at the Rocky Mount Wilson Airport, and I got a chance to start taking some flying lessons. And I remember back then I was renting an airplane. It was $54 an hour to rent the airplane. And my instructor, because he was trying to build his hours up, trying to get his commercial airline license, pilot license, he wasn't charging me anything for his time to teach me how to fly. I just had to pay for the rental on the plane, which was $54 an hour. And I think I got somewhere around 8 or 10 hours of flight time at $54 an hour. And I just couldn't afford to keep spending the money to rent the airplane. That was the bottom line. So I never did get my pilot's license. But I looked at this article, these two ads, and thought, wow, it used to be so much cheaper to learn to fly than it is now. As Bob was saying, I think now it's somewhere around $7,000 or $8,000 to get your private pilot's license. And so it's a much more involved process, certainly much more expensive. Okay, let's fast forward a bit, Lee. The next item number 12. In January of 1969, by this time, the airport itself, the Avalon Airport, had closed up as a commercial or even a municipal airport, I guess you'd say, because by this time, the airport on Church Street opened up, and that's where Air Care had relocated, and that's where local flights, Piedmont Airlines was flying commercial flights in and out of there. And so by 1969, the old Avalon Airport wasn't doing much of anything. And so some enterprising business people got together and decided, it'd be a great place for a mobile home park. And so they put this ad in the paper. Again, this is January of 1969. You see the headline, "Coming soon, Rocky Mount's newest and most modern mobile home terrace, being designed and laid out by a certified engineer. only 1.3 miles from city limits, ultra modern with these conveniences. There's going to be a store, laundromat, bathhouse, swimming pool, large lots, potential of 275 large lots, some as large as 60 by 160, 60 foot by 160 foot. Central water and sewer system located on Highway 97 East, under construction now, opening soon. For more information, call, and it's got a number there, and it was going to be called the Avalon Trailer Terrace Incorporated, and at the very bottom of the page it says formerly the Avalon Airport property. So some enterprising business people had decided, you know what, we'll make a mobile home park out here where this old airport used to be, and we'll make it very modern. We'll put a swimming pool out there and a laundromat and a bathhouse. We'll give these folks big, large lots, put the trailers on, and we'll just make a bunch of money with our new mobile home lot. Well, it apparently never happened. I don't ever recall seeing a mobile home of any kind out there. Maybe someone does. If so, let me know. But I think this ad appeared kind of as a fishing thing, expedition, if you will, trying to see if there's any interest in people moving into a mobile home, trailer park, whatever, out there at the old Avalon Airport. But to my knowledge, I never saw, I looked, in earnest, I looked for some more advertisements, more indication of anybody ever moving out there, and found none, found zero instances of anyone moving out there. What I did find, however, which I thought was interesting, item number 13, Lee, if you would, in March of 1970, the very next year, not even a year actually, well, a little over a year, because in January of '69 there were plans to build this mobile home park. In March of 1970, this fellow you see hanging in the trees here is hanging by a parachute, and the caption reads, "Unexpected landing. This unidentified student of the Rocky Mount Sports Parachute Club had an unexpected landing Sunday when he came to rest in a tree. This was the first jump for the student at the old Avalon Airport on NC 97. Some 32 jumps were made, and this student reportedly was the only one to land in a tree. The club will have jumps at the drop zone here each Sunday. Dorsey Brazel and Marvin Farmer are the instructors." So this fellow's got a smile on his face from ear to ear. It's amazing he wasn't seriously injured or killed, but he landed in a tree, by all indications, like a pine tree. But at this time, in March of 1970, there was no mobile homes apparently out there. They were using the airstrip to take skydivers up and let them jump out of perfectly good airplanes. Still don't, that never made any sense to me, but some folks get those kinds of thrills, I suppose. But this fellow jumped out of the airplane, launched his parachute above him, and somehow they ended up in a tree. And so I guess he managed to get down, but in this picture, it's hard to tell what you see on your TV screen, but trust me, he's got a broad grin on his face when this picture was taken. So I don't know if he was hurt or not, but he seemed to be pretty happy just to be alive, I guess. Okay, so that was all I could find about Avalon in the short time I had allocated trying to find something about the skeleton and the bones and so forth. And as I said earlier, I thought, well, maybe if I go back and look some more for Miss Maywood's bail. And Lee, bring it back to me if you will. We're going to take another commercial break here in just a minute. Before we do, I just want to put this out. I've had the pleasure, it was last summer I believe it was, I went to see Miss Maywood Bell. She's an absolute treasure. At that time, she was either coming up on a birthday or had just had one, and she was around 102. So she's around 103 now. She may already be 103. But I understand she's in a retirement home somewhere in Rocky Mount. I'm not sure where that is, but I would love to go see her. So if anyone knows which retirement home or assisted living home that Miss Bell is residing in now, please let me know. Like I said, I had a nice visit with her. She had actually had someone call me and say, look, Miss Bell's got a computer. She's got computer problems. Can you go take care of it for her? And so I went over there, and she really didn't have much of a problem, but I stayed about an hour, and we just had a nice talk, and she was such a pleasant lady. She was very fragile, very frail, but still had a mind sharp as a tack. I mean, she could tell you stories and remember things. And I'm sure if I can sit in front of her, she'll resolve this mystery about the dinosaur bones, if I can just get in front of her. And so if anyone knows where she's at, please let me know. I'd really love to go see her and spend some time with her, assuming that she's still able to entertain visitors, and if not, we'll let that go. But I would like to make an effort to get in front of her, and let's see what I can find out. So we're going to take another commercial break right now. When we come back, I went looking for what I could find on Maywood Bell, and you talk about someone with a fantastic life, trying to research her and give you any kind of illustration of what her life was like is all but impossible. But I'm going to try when we come out from the break. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with more Way Back Wednesday.
I'm Daniel Moss, owner of Cornerstone Funeral Home, and I'd like to invite you and your family to give our family an opportunity to serve you in your time of need. And we offer a full line of funeral services, everything from visitations to graveside services to cremations on site with a live crematory, as well as a banquet hall to meet the catering needs of our families that we serve. We offer catering service, we offer refreshments prior to visitation and services of our family, and we want to invite you to come and experience the difference here at Cornerstone Funeral Home.
When faced with special care needs for elderly or disabled loved ones, families want compassionate, comforting care. That's Tender Touch Home Care Services' goal, providing the level of care we would expect for our own. With over 10 years of home care excellence, Tender Touch provides an array of services that keeps your loved one at home. From personal care, light housekeeping, errands, and meal preparation, to our private duty care program, which combines all of our home care offerings in one package.
Tender Touch Home Care Services, where your needs are our concern.
And we're back. Now, before the break, I mentioned that, I had a really nice visit about a year ago with Miss Maywood Bell, and I would love to sit with her again if that's even possible. I'm not sure now about her health. I know, as I said, she was very frail and very weak when I spoke with her last year. And so, in fact, I tried to get her to come on the show, and she, I think, was interested in doing so, but she just really didn't have the strength. And I said, I'll come get you. I'll take you to the show. I'll take you back home. We can do it in segments. You can take a few minutes here and there. But she just smiled and said, well, I'll think about it. So I didn't push the issue. But I would really, truly love to sit in front of her again and talk to her and get some, if I'm not mistaken, and I may be, it's like I said, it's been a year, and we talked about so many things in the roughly hour I spent with her. I believe she told me she was actually born in England and came to this country at a very young age, of course. But in any case, I went digging some information, hopefully trying to find some future after the I think it was around 1960 or 62 when the dinosaur project kind of got put on hold. I thought, well, maybe it got picked back up later. And so I went looking. And I started prior to that looking for information on Maywood Bell. And so it was 1951 when I found the first article about Maywood's Bell. So Lee, if you would, put up item number 14. This picture here in caption appeared in the Rocky Mount Telegram, October 1951. And it's a little grainy, I understand. And I'm going to read this caption to you. It says, Bradley Dozier standing, Jimmy Moore, and Norma Savage look on attentively as Ms. Maywood's Bell, the prospective director of the Children's Museum, explains and illustrates the fine points of sketching a mounted fox. Activities of this type play a double role, teaching museum members the essentials of sketching and at the same time developing in them an appreciation of wildlife. In this picture, Miss Bell appears to be in her maybe 20s, I'm guessing, perhaps 30. She may have been around 30 at this time. But she was a sensational teacher. She loved being around young people. She loved exposing things to kids and seeing the expression on their face when they realized something they hadn't known before. And so I saw multiple articles, hundreds of articles, in fact, of her being involved with kids in one way or another. And so there was not as many pictures as there were. Well, I take that back. There probably were as many pictures too, but in the short amount of time I had to try to pull them together for the night show, I kind of tried to pick and choose what to share with you. So this, as I say, this article appeared October 1951. So let's go ahead and leave, if you would. That was item number 14. Let's go to item number 15. April of 1952. This article, there's no picture, just an article, and it was headlined Museum Additions. April 1952, Children's Museum Director May Bell has just received more than 500 individual nature specimens from the Smithsonian Institution. The gifts include Indian artifacts, flaking tools, spears, arrowheads, etc., shells, and rock and mineral specimens. All of the items received will be permanent possession of the local museum. Now keep in mind, this is 1952. The museum at City Park had not been built yet, but we had a children's museum. Ms. Bell wrote Smithsonian officials several weeks ago with a request for information concerning natural history exhibits. The museum officials wrote back that surplus items were available, but that a request for them would have to be forwarded through a congressman. Harold Cooley was contacted, and he quickly gave his endorsement to the request. Ms. Bell also announced that the local museum, located in the basement of the Brazel Memorial Library, is open to the public at any time during the regular hours, and that visitors are welcome. Now, you know, I have some very fond memories of going to the Brazel Library, and they had, I remember, glass display cases, and there was World War II exhibits down there. Uniforms and rifles and things. I did not realize that at one point the Rocky Mount Children's Museum was located within the museum, within the library, but it was. In 1952, the Children's Museum, the Rocky Mount Children's Museum, was actually located in the basement of the local library. Okay, that's 52. All right, now, and that was April of 52. Okay, November of 52, Lee, if you would, put up item number 16 for us. And this is a picture. It says, Ms. May Woods Bell, director of the Rocky Mount Children's Museum, holds one of the museum's 3 pet squirrels while Kelsey McGee administers the specially designed drinking bottle. Looking on is Gretchen Zabawa, a local high school student who has given much of her spare time to working with local children in the museum. The museum has numerous specimens of Tar Heel wildlife on exhibit. So there were apparently 3 pet squirrels that May Woods Bell had acquired, and I guess they were homed in the Children's Museum. Now, in 1952, early 52, April of 52, as I said, the museum was located in the basement of the Thomas Hackney Brazel Memorial Library. Now, there was nowhere to keep a squirrel in the library in 1952. I don't think it was anyway. But what I found was item number 17, Lee. If you put up in November of 1952, this article appeared. It says, a call for volunteers to assist in preparations for moving the Rocky Mount Children's Museum to its new headquarters in Sunset Park was issued today by Mrs. May Bell, director of the institution. Ms. Bell says she was particularly in need of assistance in cataloging and labeling various items and in restoring several exhibits for future display in the new location. Anyone available to assist in this work may call at the museum at any time during the regular hours. The museum is located in the 300 block of South Church Street. So in April of 52, the Rocky Mount Children's Museum was located in the basement of the Brazel Library. By November of 52, it had moved to the 300 block of South Church Street, which is in the general vicinity of the Rocky Mount City Hall now. And then, of course, it was a couple years later, I think 1955, before they actually got into the new building. But I didn't realize that the museum had actually been in 3 different locations from 1951 to its eventual resting spot at the Sunset Park location. Okay. Lee, item number 18, if you would. In May of 1955, this article in picture and caption, I should say, appeared in the Rocky Mount Telegram. And the headline says, Den Mothers Receive Certificates in Cub Program. And I'll read the caption. I know it's kind of small on your screen there, but it says, certificates were presented this week to several local den mothers for having completed a course in Cub Scout handicraft under Mrs. May Bell, director of the Children's Museum. The certificates were presented by T. Hardy Prather, District Scout Executive for the Rocky Mount and Nash County Districts. In the picture are left to right Mrs. Bell, that's her standing with the plaid skirt. So Miss Bell, Clara Insco, Hilda Vivert, Maxine Jones, Margaret Winstead, Florence Rotters, Lily Mae Robbins, and Scout Executive Prater. Others receiving awards but not in the picture were Mary Ruth Edwards, Jean Watchtel, Dorothy Oakley, Virginia Hucks, Alice Brinson, and Louise Mitchell. My mother was a den mother. I was in the Cub Scouts, and my mother was a den mother. And I don't know, honestly, whether she ever took this course or not. Now, it was probably, not quite 10 years later than this, before I was in the Cub Scouts. It was in the early 60s. But I'm just curious. My mother has since, of course, passed away, so I can't ask her now. But apparently Miss Bell, in addition to all her other activities and interests and duties, if you will, she was also very active with the local Cub Scout troop, and specifically the den mothers, and helping them do and prepare crafts and projects for the Cub Scout troop. So I thought that was interesting. Okay, let's fast forward a bit, Lee. October 1958, item number 19. This is a great picture of May Woods Bell, and one of the few instances where I saw she was listed by her husband's initials. As is commonplace, you see a lot of times in the telegram, ladies are referred to by her husband's initials, Mrs. blah, blah, blah. In this case, May Woods Bell was married to a man named Albert David Bell, and here she's identified as Mrs. A.D. Bell. But it's a great picture of her, and the article is kind of short, so I read it to you. It says, Mrs. May Woods Bell, director of the Rocky Mount Children's Museum, took over duties as the secretary of the Southeastern Museums Conference of the American Association of Museums here today. Ms. Bell is widely known in museum circles, having served as a council member of the conference for 3 years prior to this new appointment. Also elected as new members of the council are Joyce E. Jordan, Dr. John Kraft, a couple others listed, and it goes on to talk about the vice president and so forth. But this is a very prestigious award that she achieved in October 1958 to be named this prestigious director duties. And it's a great picture of her too. When I saw her last year, she looked very much like this, obviously much older, but good picture of her there. Okay, so that was in October 1958. By May of 1959, she was actively involved in yet another project. And Lee, if you would put up item number 20 for us. And this article, and this picture appeared in caption in May of 1959. The headline reads, Pilot Club Presents Annual Scholarship. And it says, Miss Kate Parks Kitchen, Dean of the Girls of Rocky Mount Senior High at left, looks on as Ann McCarver is presented the annual Pilot Club Scholarship by Mrs. May Bell. So that's May Bell on the next to, I think she's in a flowery skirt there with the glasses, actually. And Miss Flora Pemberton, president of the Pilot Club. You know, I haven't heard anything about the Pilot Club in, decades. I don't even know if there's still any such thing as a Pilot Club in Rocky Mount. But Miss Kate Parks Kitchen, herself an institution in Rocky Mount, particularly in the educational circles. She was still teaching school when I came through, and we used to joke that she was old as dinosaurs then. I'm not sure how old she was, but I do know that she taught my mother in the 1940s in local schools, and taught me when I came through some 20-odd years later. And so anyway, but May Woods Bell was involved in a lot of different things. A lot with children certainly, but a lot with adults too. Okay, fast forward, Lee, December 1960, item number 21. This was something I never knew about Miss Maywood. She had a pet owl. This picture here says Oceotus wilsonianus. And that's the scientific name for this owl, according to Dr. Art Scherer, biology professor at Carolina Wesleyan College, and Mrs. May Bell, director of the Children's Museum. However, it's quite all right to call it a long-eared owl. The bird, rare in this area, is convalescing at the museum. It was found in Currituck Sound. So I jokingly said she had a pet owl. Obviously, it was one that had been brought in to be nursed back to good health. But in any case, I just thought it was neat that she got involved in so many different things. And being a curator of a museum or director of a museum would not in and of itself lend you to think that she would be involved in rehabilitating injured wildlife, but apparently she was. Okay, we're getting close to running out of time. Lee, let's go to item number 22. This is one of my favorite pictures of Miss Bell. Oh, we got a call. Let's get this call real quick. Hello, caller, you on the air?
Randy.
Yes, sir.
How old is Miss Bell now?
She's either 102 or 103, but she's right there in that ballpark. She was 101 or 102 when I was at her house last summer. So it's been over a year since I was there, so she's right at 103 if she's not already 103.
Right. Well, she really does deserve this, what you're doing tonight about her, because she's a grand lady.
She is that. She's an absolute Rocky Mount treasure.
She certainly is. Good to talk to you, Randy.
Okay, buddy. Thanks for calling in. Have a good evening.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Okay. This picture appeared June 1966. One of my favorite pictures of Miss Bell. A white guinea pig is soft as a rabbit, but his ears are short. Veda Lou fell in love with this guinea pig here being shown by Ms. May Bell, director of the Children's Museum. No trip to the park is complete without a visit to the museum. That's the caption there. But you see Miss Bell smiling, just excited to see the smile on his kid's face as the kid reaches out and pets this guinea pig for the first time and feels the soft fur. Okay, fast forward again. October 1970, item number 23, Lee. Fossils donated. William D. Bennett points out an important feature of a 25 million year old piece of petrified wood to Mrs. May Bell, museum director. Bennett has just donated his entire collection of Miocene macrofossils in a related library to the local museum. This gentleman, I did not know who he was, William D. Bennett, but he donated a piece of petrified wood and apparently a bunch of other fossils and I guess his own little library of information about this collection to the museum. All this stuff, I'm afraid, got destroyed or lost when Floyd came through in '99. It's such a shame. There was some really neat artifacts in that museum. Item number 24, Lee, if you would. North Carolina Writers Conference holds its annual get-together. May Woods Bell, in addition to all the other things she was a published author. She wrote a couple of books. She wrote a book of poetry, in fact. And she was at one time on the staff as a paid writer for the Rocky Mount Telegram. This article here talks about the North Carolina Writers Conference having an annual get-together, and May Woods Bell was the one who wrote the article for the Telegram. Okay, Lee, real quickly, let's get these last couple out here. Item number 25, March 1974, May Woods Bell, she was the director of the Rocky Mount Museum, has been appointed by Governor Holshouser to serve on the administrative board of the North Carolina Marine Resources Center, which has 3 focal points in Dare, Carteret, and New Hanover counties. How she found time to be involved and be so effective in so many different things is in and of itself a major accomplishment. But to be appointed to this prestigious board by the governor of the state in 1974 was certainly a major accomplishment. I mentioned she was a writer. Item number 26, Lee, August 1976, her poetry book was published. It was called Rhymes, W-R-Y-M-E-S, and it was a book of humorous poetry that she wrote. And finally, January 1980, I never knew this, the Sunset Parks Carousel was designated as a bit of North Carolina history, and the carousel, let's see here, it says the Sunset Park Carousel is one of only 6 left in the state which still has some of the original hand-carved wooden horses. The carousel was purchased by the Rocky Mount Civitan Club during the 1940s from a carnival in Greensboro. Some of the wooden horses were discarded and replaced with metal ones but those which were salvageable were repaired and repainted and are still in use. This was in 1980. And of course, she was involved in that too. There was so much more to the life of Maywood's Belle, and I wish I had more time, and we'll readdress her life at a future show. But again, I want to thank you all for tuning in tonight. It's been my pleasure to be with you. Have a great week. Take care of yourselves and be kind to one another, folks. We'll see you next week with more Way Back Wednesday. Good night.